Welcome to a true spiritual adventure story like the world has never known, with your host, Dr. James Yogadi Weldon. Good day, this is Dr. Jim Weldon speaking to you from Heavenly Mountain in Boone, North Carolina. Our community, which is dedicated to bridging the gaps in our understanding between the different traditions of the world and exploring the potentiality of consciousness. Today, we're continuing our episodes from my third book entitled The Story Behind the Greatest Story Ever Told, subtitled Memories from the Life of Jesus. And as amazing as that may appear, it is an accurate description of what is being shared here. You know, this world behind me is very, very small in comparison to the universe as a whole. Our culture as a whole and its history is very, very short in compared to the billions of years that the universe has existed. Our knowledge, the sum total of all the knowledge on this planet, in the minds of all the people that have ever lived, you must admit is also small in comparison to the vastness possibilities. And so we need a way to bridge our understanding, to link and connect our understanding to the greater universe beyond us, so we can begin to understand and realize what we are and what our purposes are. I believe we're all brought into this world to bring something here. This story, my third spiritual adventure novel, chronicles the life of an individual, Jesus. And what we know in the biblical records is honestly just a very small portion of the life that he lived. Without going over all of those details, please go back and listen to the earlier episodes to give you an idea. In a very high state of consciousness that I'd been seeking to develop over many, many years, over a decade ago, in the form of 3D experiences that I passed through in the state called Turiya, beyond the conscious mind, beyond the time of awaking. And there are a few people who have accessed that, and access that type of knowingness is very much like linking into the internet of consciousness, the internet of wisdom. And that's enabled me to tell the story without any expectations. I'm just putting it out. At this time, in the adventure story of the life of Jesus, as he was known, he had other names. He has now gone to India, been educated in India, traveled to some of the holy lands in India as a pilgrim, and is now at a retreat center. He's basically finished his healing at the healing center. He broke his leg a couple episodes ago. And he's been there a number of years, actually in a Buddhist community, also studying in some of the other communities, but heavily influenced by the Buddhist community. In that part of the world, as it is today, many, many pilgrims go there. And he has decided to spend some time there in the Buddhist community, some years, doing the practices, the deep practices of stillness. When Buddha taught, he didn't argue with anybody. There's even a story of an individual who came to murder him and had killed a lot of other people, a mass murderer. And when this individual came to face Buddha in the quietness of the meditation community in the Sangha, he saw the face of Buddha. He was going to murder him. He came for the purpose of murdering him. And he carried with him a string of ears of individuals that he'd killed. He actually wore that as a necklace, as a badge of pride. And when he saw the Buddha and the tremendous sense of presence that the Buddha was manifesting, he fled and then came back and became a student. And the story is that this specific individual supposedly became the first self-realized, enlightened individual with Buddha. So I always figure if somebody like that can make it, there's a lot of possibility for us in this tremendous age that we're in, that such wisdom as this and many other teachers are now bringing that into the world. We're in a period of globalization of knowledge. And this is part of that globalization, so that we can understand the backstory, the true story of this individual. And so he's been in this community for some years now, and he's been away from his home almost a couple of decades and studied with great spiritual teachers, met a number of them in these regions. He traveled all around, went up to some of the holy spots, and made his way into many of these places where Buddha taught, and also into many of the centers to listen to the knowledge. After these number of years, he could speak more languages than he learned in his training in the South in Chennai. And his good friend and buddy that traveled with him, Abu Tao from the Rajasthan area originally, has now gone, has left. But in the middle of all of this and this silence, he begins to feel a longing for home again. He left that place where he was a child, about 12 or 13 years old, at the direction of the three wise men. And so he began to reminisce in his mind about family, community, and the world that he came from. And the world that he had lived in for so long now was not like that world. Rome was still conquering, was still decimating the populations, was subjugating so many communities, and the Jewish community as well, by their intolerance of acceptance of dissidents. And so he began to wonder what he could offer when and if he went home. He began to think very deeply and carefully about that. You know, the divisions because of politics or religion are common in the world today as well. And they were also common at that time. Because when people love things, they try to superimpose their ideas on those circumstances to make them turn out in certain ways. But he began to think about his home and the possibility of returning. What could he offer? What should he say? He'd seen enough divisions to understand that he needed to be very, very careful in his words. First of all, the Jewish community was very closed. And of course, the Roman philosophy at that time was to expand, and they were intolerant as well. So he began to think about what he could offer and what were the simplest teachings that he could give when he traveled home. And this was a time, these last few years that he was in that area of India, that he began to seek out more and more other individuals from the outside world. There weren't a lot of individuals that made their way this far in. And so he began to have discussions with them about what were the most basic, fundamental principles of spirituality, of human growth, of human potential. These are my words, that he could pass on. There was another wonder in his mind. What about all the peoples that had fled from Egypt at the time that Moses had left and gone into the desert? That's another story that maybe I will tell at some point here from this intuitive point of view. We'll see. And actually, the individual that was the core of that story, Moses, I know it's surprising, has recently come and gone in the world here. And so he started to think about the lost tribes of Israel and where there may be some of those individuals. And he did hear that there were some members of this community, because there were many small communities along the way of the caravan route before present land of Israel, which it's known as now. And he heard about one specific community and a few individuals that actually were in the Kashmir region. Now, part of the story is what happens to Jesus after the crucifixion. Let's say there was an ascension of some sort. We'll talk about those experiences. What happened when John the Baptist met him and baptized him? What happened during those few years? I'll share some of those stories. But the plan was to make his way back by the caravan route. And fortunately, he was given some means, wealth, as part of the blessings of his teacher and guide, Abu Tao, so that he had the means to do that more comfortably. Now, at this time in India, pilgrimages had been ongoing. So there was a support system in India for individuals that were seeking higher spiritual knowledge. And there were centers of this knowledge of India from what we call the Vedic culture. Vedas are the seeings of the rishis, of the knowers of India. And perhaps I may have a small place there. We'll see, not required. But he began to make his plans. And the discussion was how he could share this knowledge. Because Buddhism as well was opposed in its earlier history. This is a story of all new traditions often that come out in the world. We're growing up. We're waking up. We're growing out of our darkness. You could say we're moving at this time in our world into our broader education as a culture. Education in terms of the spiritual potentiality of man and understanding that there are specific stages in that growth and evolution, which is what I've been sharing here in my works about what those experiences might be. Because the West has not had the benefit of 10,000 years of advanced spiritual beings. So what are the principles? The kingdom of heaven is within you. In other words, that place of fulfillment and joy dwells at the depth of one's being. The father and mother, the creative forces that gave rise to this world and this life and this universe, are connected to us, and they are in that space. That space and place is not a place of ideas and concepts and beliefs. It's completely beyond that. It's a place of oneness. There aren't two. The words and the expositions of all the great spiritual traditions of the world and all the great teachers that have come and are coming point to that, but are not that. That is only known by itself, for itself, in itself, as the reality of one's existence. And one finds in the depth of that place that all that is contained in that. The outer space is actually part of the inner space. And by attaining that, it doesn't mean there aren't any pains in life, there aren't any difficulties, but one moves into a space of clarity and joy, which is actually beyond all the differences, the dualities. Pleasure, pain, happiness, gain, loss, life, death. It's beyond that. There is a place that can be lived as one's very nature and known, and ultimately through maybe years, maybe decades, perhaps many, many lifetimes also, far away. It's as closer than our breath and our mind and our intellect and ego. We are like an ocean, and the depth of our being, we are connected with all of that ocean. This is not a reality of words. This is a reality of the direct cognitive experience in life. And to the degree one is established in that, one really has something to offer. And all of this work of the young master Jesus is for attaining that for himself. And there are stages of that, progressive stages of that. And so join me again we're now going to begin the journey back home. He's going to travel to a few more holy sites, speak with a few more individuals along the way. We'll see what happens in those events. So join me again in our ongoing exploration of the potentialities of the life of Jesus, which is part of our life, but it is a progressive understanding and experience. It's very different than just accept it in our belief system, and that's it. There's something much, much, much more profound than that. And the whole purpose of what I'm doing here is hopefully to provide a bridge so people begin to understand that. Ultimately, this must happen because this is the reality of what is true. We'll talk to you again. Dr. Jim Weldon speaking from our wonderful community here in Heavenly Mountain in Boone, North Carolina, on the ongoing saga. What a saga it is. And some unbelievable, incredible things are coming. Jesus has no idea what's going to happen. He couldn't begin to imagine, even at this point, even with all the years that he's trained. He's been told generally what's going to happen in his life. He's not sure if he believes all the things that he has been told. We'll talk to you again. Bye-bye.